was that going to cover us when we were talking?
Yeah. He's right. He's right.
Oh, yeah. You don't get, that's why I don't teach anybody else. Yeah. All right, you guys ready?
Are you waiting for me? Okay. All right, so my name is Christopher Samaran.
I'm Andrew Ginty.
I'm Jonathan Mitchell.
I'm Brenda Snoon. Elia Gonzalez.
And I'm Adrian Antiaco.
All right, so we're going to be talking about the Olympics and the effects on South Korea. I'm going to start by going over the projections. They initially set a budget for $7 billion as costs, and they're expecting a return of $59.4 billion over the next decade. They are expecting an increase in the overhead capital facilities, which is going to be your communications, your transportations, and your power housing facilities, which is going to increase jobs. So they're estimating an increase in 230,000 jobs. That increase in jobs is forecasted to increase the private consumption by 0.1% points, which is going to increase their GDP. And also they're expected over 400,000 foreign tourists. Those 400,000 tourists are expected to spend $360 million during the events. And throughout the year after the Olympics, they're expecting to have 2 million more tourists this year than previous years.
My name's Jonathan. I'll be talking about the actual budget. The actual budget was $13 million. $4 million about is what they spent on just an express train, which Houston doesn't have. It's a bullet train. Also, they spent $1.5 billion on a ski resort, which you can see. Most of the money they spent was on infrastructure, and a lot of it was also spent to accommodate guests that they were just going to have. They also spent $109 million on a stadium, which they only used for opening and closing ceremonies. The per hour cost of one of these, of this stadium for use was about $10 million. Other buildings they built were the Pyeongchang and Gangwon Olympic villages, which housed around 600 units. And later we'll talk about, Elia will talk about what they're going to do with these buildings after. They also spent $200 million on the Jansung Alpine Center, which is the ski slope you see on the presentation. They also spent $85 million on 2 hockey rinks, one for men's and one for women's. They didn't share a hockey rink, just 2 separate rinks. And they also spent $120 million on an 8,000 seat ice arena, which later they're going to use for a giant seafood freezer if they can't find anything else to do with it.
So now that Jonathan's talked to you guys about the actual numbers, I'm going to tell you about some of the benefits to hosting the Olympic Games. So beyond mere ticket sales, it also created a lot of new jobs between construction, contracting, and the actual running of the games. Several new people would be employed. But it also presents a stage for international exposure, which not only presents a way to show their civic pride, but also to showcase their new technology. For instance, one of the big issues leading into these 2018 Winter Olympic Games was that of cybersecurity. And the mere fact that nobody's talking about it currently shows what a good job they did with their cybersecurity. Nobody's lost information or gotten their accounts hacked and stolen. A rather unique benefit that South Korea was able to enjoy from hosting these Olympics is the strengthening of their foreign relations. particularly with their border country, North Korea, and the other communist superpower in the area, China. Next slide. So tourism is also a benefit to hosting these games. Over 80,000 foreign tourists from America and North America flew over to South Korea, and on average, these tourists spent over $4,600. And once they got there, that was only the cost of getting to South Korea. They continued to spend. These tourism numbers were actually enough to offset what had been declining Chinese tourism, because due to the rough relations between China and South Korea, China had no longer been immigrating and visiting into South Korea, and these numbers were actually enough to completely offset those. And finally, I'm going to talk about how modern innovators have seized an opportunity to do something new. For instance, the company Airbnb had their biggest numbers ever in South Korea, up over 270% on what they did the previous year. They sold out the equivalent of 4,500 hotel rooms through Airbnb. Now, Brenda's going to talk to you guys a little bit about the sponsors.
So official sponsors use the Olympics as a platform to showcase their products and or services to a mass audience. This year in the United States, there was around 28.3 million viewers that saw the opening ceremony for the event. It was broadcasted to more than 200 countries, and there was 13 sponsors that was part of the IOP, and each one contributes around $100 million. Depending on their contract, it can last for 4 years, 8 years, or 12 years. The official sponsors are given the privilege to associate themselves with the Olympic rings, and they're able to showcase their products during the event. There has been a debate on whether or not being an official sponsor brings enough benefit to outweigh the cost, such as Rule 40, where it allows non-official sponsors to indirectly associate themselves with the Olympics, such as, for example, Nike. You would think that they are an official sponsor, however, they are not. So being a non-official sponsor and reaping all these benefits at a fraction of a cost really does put a different perspective on whether or not it is if it's a great idea to be an official sponsor. However, in total there was $464 million invested in the event by official sponsors.
Okay, my name's Adrian Anikiadiko, and I'm going to be playing off what Andrew said about the positive impact. While there was a lot of positive impact and benefits to South Korea from the games, there was also some downside. Firstly, South Korea had a lot to prove with their Olympics because there was an increasing worry around the world that hosting the Olympics is not the best idea because so many cities are now overshooting their budgets by billions and billions of dollars. We saw this most especially in Rio de Janeiro for their Summer Olympics, when their projected budget was around $10 billion, but they ended up spending nearly $50 billion. And we saw the same in Sochi. Their Winter Olympics in 2014, they overspent by billions. And as we stated earlier, the projected budget for South Korea was $7 billion, and they almost doubled that with $13 billion. So more and more cities are weary of the potential of overshooting the budget. Gangwon, the host county of the games, they're now incurring an $8.5 million deficit each year to maintain the upkeep of these now unused facilities, which Elliot will talk about in a little bit. The most hurt people by the games were the local business owners, specifically the ski and snowboard rental shop owners. According to the Phoenix Ski and Snowboard Shop Rental Association in South Korea, they claim that business is down 80% from last year, which is a really big deal to these companies because they have about a 5-month window to make their entire annual revenue due to the nature of the ski season. And here's a picture of a massive poster they put up. And to be clear, the Olympics not actually kill anybody, but they're referring to their livelihood and their businesses. Along with the economic impact, there was some environmental impact, there was a negative environmental impact. Specifically, in order to build a brand new ski slope, the Olympic Committee and the County of Gangwon destroyed a significant portion of a 500-year-old forest that is considered sacred to many people in South Korea. And this forest also houses 4 endangered species, so it raised many concerns for environmentalists. And it's a growing concern for future host cities because there's increased emphasis on going green, and it's hard to do. And lastly, I will refer to what people are now calling the white elephants, the term became popular in Rio de Janeiro when they built many brand new facilities, massive stadiums for their games. But after the Olympics were over and everyone went home, these massive stadiums just stood there and they've gone completely unused and no one really knows what to do with them. And so the term white elephants was coined, and it's a growing concern as well. And now Elia will talk about the white elephants, but first, this.
Hello. The 2018 Olympics hosted in South Korea has been economically profitable thanks to the games and contributors, as Brenda also mentioned it. On the other hand, the usual truth left over the facilities and its future is that typically when Olympics are over, there are many instances where nations are unable to utilize such grand facilities, or they waste money trying to maintain them when they serve no purpose. South Korea has learned from the success and failure from their predecessors, so to avoid tragic outcomes, the organizers have planned the future of those venues. Workers will eventually tear down 2 of the main venues, and that way they critically will not be abandoned or become expensive to maintain. They also already signed contracts with universities and local governments for the use of 9 venues. So this is how they will be prevented from becoming the usual post-Olympic white elephants, as they also mentioned it. Based on the information we all provided, South Korea has been a model of efficiency. The majority of the buildings finished 6 months before the Olympic Games. And now with their plan to utilize the majority of the facilities, they are also demonstrating their efficiency to avoid the expensive post-Olympic white elephants. And that's how we conclude.
12 minutes. 12 minutes. Okay. Keep the slides up. So I know it just time goes at a different pace when you're in front of there, right? So what did you like about the presentation?
I liked how they contrasted past Olympics to the current Olympics and showed the trend of how they overspend, and it really doesn't benefit the economy of that local area well.
Okay, so when you're talking the details of it, is it very clear this group did a lot of research?
Yes.
Good numbers, good statistics, good research. And some of the things that they talk about, I think that the struggle for this group, if I'm gonna guess, is trying to they probably could have talked about all this stuff, at least twice the time?
Yeah.
Because there's so much there. There's so much there that they could have talked about. So the struggle, and I think this is something really worth mentioning, the struggle for any group when you're doing a presentation is narrowing your focus, what you are going to talk about, to try to honor the time frame that you've been given. So I think maybe they tackled just a little too much, and at least one of the topics could have gone, okay? Is this still on?
Yeah, let me see.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, sorry.
So this one here?
It's the start stop button.